Good morning, everyone. I just want to acknowledge that I'm joining you from Treaty 6 territory in the traditional lands of the Métis. My name is Samantha Becotte. I'm the president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation. And I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us here today. If you weren't aware, I just want to start out by also acknowledging that this week is Teacher and School Staff Appreciation Week, and I want to share on behalf of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, our sincere thanks for teachers and school staff and the work that they do to support students across the province. They are doing incredible things in many places, despite the challenges that they face in their schools and their classrooms as they work to fill the gaps that government has created over the last decade. And instead of taking these past 2 days to reset and start working with teachers in good faith, this government has chosen to thank teachers by continuing to disrespect them and gaslight them, and not acknowledging their responsibility in ensuring that we have a high quality publicly accessible public education system here in Saskatchewan. And here at the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, we deal in facts. That has been our position the entire time. So I'd like to clearly share the facts of the timeline over the last 2 days. Everything within this timeline we can back up with communication or evidence of attendance if required. So we put aside 2 full days and expected to negotiate throughout the day and into the evening if necessary. Before we even got to the table, the start time for the first day was delayed until 1 p.m. by the GTBC. At 1 p.m., we started the conversation on Monday with some of the proposals that were brought by the GTBC, as well as class complexity. But we put aside any conversations on salary and benefits until another time. At that point, we had asked the GTBC to call the minister and get further direction on what we had proposed, because it was clear they had not been provided with the authority to actually engage in negotiations at that time. So it is a common part of the process where after a few items have been presented, the 2 teams often separate and work individually to discuss the proposals that have been brought forward. And so that's what happened around 2 o'clock on Monday. After they had been given a little bit of time and we were ready to come back together, the GTBC said that they needed more time, which alluded to the fact that they were working on it. If it was a no at that time, if they were not willing to discuss class complexity, they simply could have communicated that to us, but they attempted to delay the process further until Wednesday morning. This creates a significant challenge for the Teachers Bargaining Committee because we have teachers who sit on that committee. We have classroom teachers, we have principals who would need to then create subplans, try and ensure that there's a substitute teacher for their class. It creates a significant disruption, and it's not as easy as just saying, hey, I need an extra hotel night. We wanted to get down to the conversations, and like I said, we had committed those 2 days to doing that. So we pushed back a bit and we were able to come to an agreement that we would resume conversations at 5:30 on Tuesday. So it would still provide the GTBC with a full day to continue preparing, even though they should have come to the table prepared to begin with. Unfortunately, shortly after 3 p.m., we received communication from the GTBC that they would not be returning. So because we had only discussed a few items, we didn't get to salary and benefits because they didn't come back to the table to have those discussions. Shortly after the communication from the GTBC, we received communication from the Ministry of Education with their proposal around an agreement outside of the bargaining process. This agreement doesn't include anything new from what we have seen with their pilot projects or one-time funding. And the challenge with this is that they can cancel the agreement at any time. There's also, because it's not in the collective bargaining process, there is no dispute resolution if government were not to hold up their side of the agreement. So essentially, it's an agreement with no accountability. And that's what they have been doing all along. It's saying, hey, we're going to do this, trust us. And unfortunately, as history has shown, they walk back on their word too often. So that agreement really isn't worth the paper that it's written on. Essentially, the minister and the Ministry of Education and the Saskatchewan Party government are trying to make a pinky promise with teachers while they cross their fingers behind their back. This MOU was proposed as an agreement directly between teachers and government. And despite funding going to school boards, the minister says that the minister saying that the decisions around funding being best made at the local table, they decided to leave school boards out of this agreement. To me, that's a clear indication of how little respect and value this government actually has for those local representatives. With all of government messaging aimed at misleading the public, I'm really not sure how they think teachers would accept anything outside of the collective agreement where they can be held accountable to any commitments that they're making. Throughout this entire negotiations process, the government's actions have been deplorable. I truly believe they have never come to bargaining with the intention of negotiating in good faith. The billboards first came up in July, and we have a FOIP request that shows planning was well underway in June before the GTBC even presented their proposals at the table. They have taken every opportunity to try and push things away from the bargaining table and away from where they can be held accountable. And year after year, they attempt to bring forward ad hoc one-time funds, trying to see how little they can provide for public education for the kids in Saskatchewan. They see this as a cost item only. And to me and to parents across the province, education is the best investment that we can make. And they are investing, if you want to call it investing, far below what I would even consider a bare minimum. For example, what they want to celebrate in the public this year as successes with the new pilot projects. The first one with the student support room providing $3.6 million for 8 schools. For those 8 schools, $3.6 million will make a significant difference. But that impacts just over 1% of schools in Saskatchewan. If they were committed to this pilot, they should be committing $270 million that would be needed to expand this to all schools across the province. Similarly, they've provided a teacher innovation fund, and teachers are so overwhelmed trying to hold together a broken system that I'm surprised teachers have even had time to submit the application for this fund. But it just goes to show how needed these funds are, that they have taken the time to submit requests. And even with this, $410,000 have been provided to 9 teachers, essentially getting an average of $45,000 per teacher. If they were committed to providing supports for teachers so that they can be successful in their work, this would require over $600 million in education. Those are large numbers. But if they're not committing to that, they're creating winners and losers across Saskatchewan, both within teachers and within students. And that's not okay with me. It shouldn't matter where you go to school in this province. You should be getting the supports that you need to be successful in our pre-K to 12 public education system. This government has acknowledged that there are complexities in our school, but like they do so often, they continue to pass the blame onto others and not accept responsibility for their decisions and the impact that those decisions have had on our public education system. We've heard them pass the blame onto school boards, saying that decisions around resourcing is a school board, best made by school boards, and they're not getting involved in it. They have most recently last week, the Minister of Education talked about how 40 kids in a classroom is okay if you have the right kids. I mean, there aren't right and wrong kids in our schools. We have students who are coming to schools with needs. Whether those students have additional needs or not, 40 students is simply too many students, and this minister refused to acknowledge that point. Our kids are struggling in our schools and they are not getting the support that they need, and teachers are fighting to ensure that this government is held accountable to their responsibility of providing a high-quality education to all students across our province. So thank you for joining me here today. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you raise your hand. Alec, always quick on that.
Absolutely. Quick on the draw. Samantha, we just spoke with Minister Cockrell, and he seemed to indicate that bargaining started at 1, and by 1:30, the teachers bargaining committee had left the table, never to return. From your account, that is not what occurred. I was hoping to just explicitly ask what specifically happened at 1 o'clock to 1:30. What was the understanding leaving the table, and is the minister incorrect in his assessment?
Yeah, the minister is absolutely incorrect. Maybe he's confused about what happened. Maybe he received miscommunication from the individuals on the GTBC. Maybe he is just intentionally misleading the public. I don't know. From what we experienced at the table, we started negotiations at 1 o'clock. Like I said, we pushed aside salary and benefits until a later time, and we focused our conversation on class complexity. At that time, when we finished the conversation on class complexity, as it often happens in negotiations, there needs to be a back and forth. And teams need to discuss that back and forth on their own before discussing it at the table with both sides present. So we took time to caucus at around 2 o'clock and meet with our individual teams. I believe it was kind of close to 3 o'clock, if I'm getting the time right on that, that we called the GTBC and to see if they were prepared to come back together to further discuss what we had talked about with class complexity. They said that they needed more time and requested that we delay until the next day and we get the night. And then we received a call later in the evening, I believe it was closer to 5, maybe even after 5, to say that they were requesting to meet Wednesday morning. We were able to push them back and get them to Tuesday at 5:30. But again, like I said, at 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, we received communication from the GTBC that they would not be returning. So we were at the offices. We were there and ready to begin those conversations again, and even get to the other proposals that hadn't been addressed at that time. But GTBC was or chose not to be present during those conversations.
With respect to that MOU, you already touched on this, but there's, from my read of it, there's nothing. An MOU is never legally binding. That's a byproduct of it. It's more or less a handshake or a sign of good intentions, and this one can be nullified within a year of written notice. I suppose if that was a attempt to appease some of the asks from the STF, it doesn't sound like it's gone over well. What's your reception to the MOU as opposed to actual bargaining, and why is it insufficient in your view?
Well, exactly as you pointed out, an MOU that is not attached to the collective agreement, there is no recourse for teachers to take if government doesn't uphold their side of the agreement, if funding doesn't go to school divisions. And so we need to have assurances that we can grieve this process, that we can have some sort of dispute resolution if government doesn't uphold their agreements. We have seen too many times promises being made, and then the following year, government clawing back funds. And that is not what we need in Saskatchewan. We need to know that beyond an election, any promises that are made this year are going to continue for the foreseeable future. And we can set that to a 4-year agreement. We can set that to an indefinite amount of time until class complexity is adequately addressed by both sides. But both sides need to be able to hold each other accountable within this process. And government seems to be wanting to, like you said, appease the interests of teachers, but in a way that doesn't hold them accountable, in a way that they're able to then get out of that commitment relatively quickly.
Are you folks making demands? The minister seems to characterize the positions of the STF as demands to the bargaining table, demands for a 23.4% salary increase over 4 years. Like, I was hoping you might just be able to address that, because he seems to be fairly entrenched in his position that there's no willingness to move on issues like salary on the part of the STF.
We have always been willing to negotiate. Our teachers bargaining committee has always had the authority to negotiate. Unfortunately, it is the other side, the GTBC, that hasn't had that authority. They have brought one-time kind of take it or leave it offers to the negotiations table. And that's not what negotiations should be. So again, the Minister of Education continues to mislead the public, share misinformation about the realities of the process, the realities of the situation. And we have seen this playbook before. I mean, it is in this government's history where they paint teachers as greedy teachers, or they paint the Federation, specifically myself, as unreasonable and unable to work together. We are ready to come to the table and find an agreement. I was actually very hopeful coming into Monday and Tuesday that we would come to an agreement at the end of the day. And I was willing to stay through the night. Like, I would have stayed until midnight or 2 a.m. and worked it out if we could have come to an agreement, and a reasonable agreement that works for both sides. We understand what we have put forward is likely not going to be where we end up. But we need to have that back and forth conversation, and we need government willing to engage with us on a back and forth conversation to get to a point where all sides are happy.
Okay, last one for me here for right now. You mentioned an FOI with respect to the billboards. Did you, just as a point of clarification, did you say that you've received that back, or you've merely submitted it?
No, we had submitted FOI around the billboards. We did receive back a significant amount of redacted information. Mostly just gave us dates and timelines in terms of when those decisions were occurring.
Would you be able to share those with reporters?
Possibly. We can check on that afterwards of what information we can share.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep. Josh?
Yeah, you touched on this a little bit just now, but last week, the minister's video went up, and we're going to offer this new salary formula potentially. The premier said the word mandate, but beyond that, I mean, the messaging even last week was like, these issues such as classroom size, complexity, it seemed to be the feeling was the same. I'm just wondering why the STF decided, with that in mind, and they were actually quite open about that aspect of it and that messaging. I'm curious why the STF decided to return to the table.
Well, as I've said already, we have approached this process in good faith throughout the entire process. Our messaging to the public is in good faith. We share facts. Our approach to the conversations at the table has been in good faith. We're ready to have the back and forth conversation. And we, like I said, we were cautiously optimistic last week. We know that sometimes political messaging in the public is different than messaging behind the scenes. So we were hopeful that that might be the case, and the GTBC would have a mandate to begin conversations around class size and complexity. Unfortunately, that didn't seem to be the case, although at the table they didn't actually say no. They said they would see what they would do. They said that they needed more time, and ultimately after a day of waiting, they said that they wouldn't be returning. So we are still hopeful that we can get this government to start making real commitments, and commitments where they can be held accountable through the bargaining process. So commitments with not just teachers, but with school boards as well who sit there.
And just one more for me. I've covered a variety of negotiations and various sectors over many years. Never once can I recall the sort of the timeline, minute to minute, of when things were happening during a day being part of the discussion or the public discourse. What do you make of the fact that we're even talking about this right now?
Well, I mean, it just goes to show the level of disrespect that this government continues to show teachers, and the lengths that this government is going to mislead the public about the realities of what the process looks like. I would love to be at the table and having meaningful conversations about finding solutions to the challenges that students and teachers are facing in classrooms in all areas of this province. Unfortunately, I'm spending more of my days sharing the realities of the situation within bargaining, and showing the misinformation that this minister continues to share.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Andrew?
Hey, good morning. You talked about, being cautiously optimistic going into this, what was the atmosphere like when you guys arrived on Monday? You know, there's been a lot of tense back and forth in the public and all of this. What was the actual atmosphere like when you walked into that room?
It was a little awkward, I guess, because there has been dispute. But at the same time, the people who are sitting at the table, they're not the ones that are making the decisions. So we have developed some good relationships with individuals at the table. I mean, myself, I took out of it that a book I can read with my kids is Harry Potter, and I've started reading Harry Potter with my kids through one of the relationships that I developed at the table and information that's been shared just in informal conversations that occur there. And so I mean, we don't hold it against the individuals who are sitting at the table because they're not the ones that are setting the mandate. I actually in the end, I kind of feel bad for them that they're put in this position and they haven't been given the authority to engage in those conversations in good faith.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Will?
Hi, good morning. I was just wondering how you feel about sanctions returning this Friday. Like, is there any concern that maybe public support might dwindle as these continue?
Absolutely, that's part of the conversation that we have. Although I think that the public is very on side with teachers at this point. They see that we are fighting for the future of public education. We're fighting for supports for their children, our students, to ensure that everyone can be successful in our pre-K to 12 education system. The government likes to, or is trying to, mislead the public and say that this is about salary and paint teachers as just being greedy. But again, we're really focused on class size and complexity. Salary will be a part of the conversation, but we need to have assurances that students are going to get the support that they need so that they can be successful in their learning and teachers can be successful in their career that they have chosen and that they love to do. But it is getting harder and harder to be in a classroom and just feel defeated at the end of the day, where you feel like you have done everything you possibly can and it's simply not enough. And teachers are burning out, teachers are leaving the profession. And it's really hard to see as a colleague. It's hard to see as a parent, knowing the efforts that teachers are going to try and meet the needs of kids. So we're disappointed that it came to this point again. Again, government has removed all other options for teachers to try and advance negotiations and resolve the dispute that is occurring. This is the only option that we have to try and apply additional pressure to the government and get them to come back to the table with the authority to negotiate around class size and complexity specifically.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew?
How important is the February break coming up for teachers and students right now that are dealing with a lot of stress with everything that's happened the last few months here?
Oh, very important. Absolutely. Teachers are, like I said, teachers are burning out. It's sad to think that it hasn't been that long since the winter break in December and January. And teachers are already feeling the exhaustion. I know students are feeling the exhaustion and needing the break as well. It takes a toll. And like I said, it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be needing a break to recover from the toll that has been taken physically, mentally, and emotionally, trying to meet the needs of kids in schools. And so yes, absolutely, teachers are likely looking forward to the break, but again, with the stress or added stress of negotiations kind of always weighing on them, it likely won't be the restful break that they deserve.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so not seeing any other hands up. I would again just reiterate my thanks to everyone who has joined and obviously the work of media in helping to shine a light on the realities that teachers and students are facing across the province, the realities of this negotiation cycle. I look forward to the day where I can be sharing positive information and a tentative agreement. I would love that to be sooner rather than later. And so I would again thank public for their support as well in this process, helping to urge government to come back to the table and engage in those good faith conversations. And if you haven't and you are concerned, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to your minister. You can do that through our Tell Them Tuesday platform. The last I heard, which is probably not accurate at this point, but we had over 50,000 phone calls and emails that have been sent now since kind of that mid-January or beginning of January when we returned from the winter break. This government needs to start listening, and they need to start making commitments and real commitments where they can be held accountable, not just in a 1-year time, but over a longer period of time to ensure that students are going to get the supports that they need in classrooms in all areas of this province. So thank you for joining us. And I guess one last thing, it is Teacher Appreciation Week. So for parents that might be joining, please, I do encourage you as well to share your appreciation of all the work that teachers are doing to try and support their students in classrooms. So thank you.